In today's video, we are going to be discussing and breaking down John Mayer's pedalboard that he used for the John Mayer Trio reunion show for the Love Rocks benefit concert in New York City. This is going to be an extremely fun video. We're going to go over all of the pedals, as well as near the end of the video, we're going to discuss what pedals John was using during the 3 songs that the John Mayer Trio performed. So sit back, relax, and let's get into today's video. Alright, I don't know about you guys, but when the show was first announced, I was extremely excited to see what pedals John would bring for this performance. The John Mayer Trio has always been kind of my favorite version of John, I guess in terms of his live performances and the different things with Dead & Company, his main solo stuff. The trio's always been my favorite, and the pedals especially were something I was very excited to share. And of course, we got some really great photos of John's pedalboard that he used. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to have the exact same image that you guys are looking at on your screen on my computer here, and we're just going to run through them together. It's going to be the easiest way to go over it. So let's get into this pedalboard breakdown. Okay, so the very first pedal is an exotic XW1 wah pedal. This really isn't a surprise because this is the only wah pedal John has used for quite a few years now, and you can't blame him. It's fantastic. Even that slightly smaller footprint is just a brilliant part of this pedal's design. I know me personally, one of the pedals I was kind of hoping to see for the show was maybe something like the RMC8 Equalizer, especially if they performed Good Love Is On The Way. However, they didn't perform that song, so the wah pedal is kind of redundant anyway. Moving on, we have a TC Electronics Polytune 3. It's impossible to tell. I'm going to just point out if he's using the buffer on or not. It's possible it's just off and it's just the tuner he's using, or maybe he's using it for the buffer. We don't know. The next pedal here is a Keeley Katana, the version 1. Not a surprise to see John honestly using any of these first 3 pedals. The Keeley Katana, his favorite clean boost. It's Mayer pedalboard, he's gonna have a katana on it. Okay, now it's at this point we're going to discuss the drive section, and here's where things get very, very interesting. One of the biggest kind of questions that I get asked in the John Mayer Gear Lounge on Facebook and other forums, is what is the best order of drive pedals when it comes to the John Mayer thing, the John Mayer lead tone? Is it better to have Tube Screamer into Klon Centaur, or is it better to have Klon Centaur into Tube Screamer, or what does John primarily use? And while that usually was the Klon into the TS10 being the main kind of example of it, over the years and as previous tours have kind of come and gone, John's actually started to almost favor running the Klon last and having the TS10 actually stack into the Klon Centaur, which is what I personally actually prefer. But for this performance, the pedalboard was TS10, then the Klon Centaur, then another TS10. So John literally had both options at his disposal for this performance, which was really cool. Now, if we take a moment to actually go back to 2016 during the Polo Theater performance with the John Mayer Trio, one of the kind of last John Mayer Trio shows, especially right before the Search for Everything World Tour, it's kind of a one-off performance right before kind of the last time we ever saw the trio. That pedalboard actually had 2 TS10s on it, no Klon Centaur. So it was kind of cool to see a really cool John Mayer Trio show where he was experimenting with 2 TS10s, and I believe that's the only time we've ever seen him actually use 2 TS10s on a pedalboard like that before, and now we're seeing him do it again with another John Mayer Trio show. This time, however, it's TS10, Klon Centaur, TS10. So you literally can choose to stack TS10 into Klon Centaur, or do Klon Centaur into TS10, or even do both TS10s into each other, especially if they're set a little differently. Now, it's at this point as well, I feel like we have to touch on the Sawbrock Tour pedalboard, because John actually did kind of the exact same thing for at least a bit of the Sawbrock Tour, kind of the first half of it. He ran TS10 into Klon Centaur into Vemoram TSV 808. So while the kind of last pedal in that 3-pedal series wasn't a TS10, it still was another Tube Screamer, although I guess you could argue the Vemoram is not quite a Tube Screamer anymore at this point. It's an incredible sounding pedal. It's one of the best overdrive pedals I've ever played. But it's still the same principle of a Tube Screamer-ish thing after the Klon, and then having a TS10 going into the Klon. So John had experimented with kind of doing that same thing before, but now we're just seeing it, in fact, the full-on TS10 instead of having that Vemoram TSV 808, which again, it's a bit of its own thing. So you can't help but wonder if maybe that had some influence on its pedal choice as well. But to see this exact combination I'm not sure about you guys, but it made me go back onto Reverb and start looking for another TS10 just to try it out, stacking two TS10s even together to see what that would sound like, because, spoiler alert, as I mentioned before, we're going to discuss this later on in the video, that's what John did for this performance. He was actually stacking the two screamers into each other for part of his lead sound. And TS10s have definitely not gotten cheaper. Mine, actually, that I have is a made in Japan one. I found it locally on Kijiji, which is kind of like Canada's Craigslist for anyone who's not in Canada. I found it for 80 Canadian or 90 Canadian. So I did very well on it, and it kind of would pain me to shell out what they're costing now in order to get another one, but maybe at some point I will get another TS10 to give this a shot. So now we're going to move on to the back row, and John just kills me sometimes because he's using a way huge Aquapus Mark II. Now, when it comes to the majority of his main tours, except for the Search for Everything World Tour, he's always used a Mark I Aquapus. That's what he's used, just either in the rack unit or on the big pedal board. It's always been a Mark I, again, save for the Search for Everything World Tour. For a lot of smaller performances or his kind of B rig for when he performed like Alec Benjamin, for example, or with Bob Weir during the Sob Rock era, he had the Aquapus Mark II, which is whatever. But I don't care what anyone says, and you guys can argue in the comments with me. The Mark I and the Mark II do not sound the same. I've owned all three Aquapuses. I own all three Aquapuses right now. You can watch my friend the London Guitarist demo on YouTube as well, which is the only demo you ever need to watch of all three of them. I'll link that in the description down below. But they do not sound the same. They just do not. I don't care that it's a short, subtle slapback. They do not sound the same. So a part of me wonders if John has had his Mark II modified to be another Mark I, an AP1 or AP2, whatever it is. A part of me wonders if he's done that, just because they do not sound the same. Now, it could just be that John just doesn't care, and he's, for a big touring rig, okay, I'll use my Mark I. But I don't know. He's not touring right now, and he has said that he moves his Klon Centaur around from board to board, from rig to rig. It's the only one he owns, according to right from John. And I can't help but think he probably would own another Mark I Aquapus. I'm sure he probably kept the AP2 that he had during the Trio and Continuum era, but I don't know. He's using a Mark II here, and if he's going to the trouble of, my point is, if he's going to the trouble of moving the Klon Centaur from rig to rig, I don't see why he wouldn't go to the trouble of moving the AP1 that he's currently using, the Mark I AP1 Aquapus. That's just my rant. You guys know, if you guys know me in the channel, you guys know I love the Mark I Aquapus, and it was my holy grail pedal that took me years to acquire, and I really do like how it sounds. I think it's brilliant. The Mark II Aquapus doesn't sound bad, but it just sounds different. Again, I don't care what people say. They just don't. So, I don't know. John just kills me with this selection. That's my little tangent on the Aquapus selection here. Moving on, then we have the Providence Chrono delay. We know that this is John's favorite main digital delay. It's got the screen on it, which is super accurate and just very handy. The tap tempo function on it works brilliantly. If he's using one delay pedal, it's going to be that on his pedal board, that's for sure, for longer delays at least. Now, the next section here is very interesting because what we have is a Keeley looper. And actually, one second, I'm going to go in my pedal cabinet and grab it for you guys. All right, so what John has on his pedal board is one of these guys. Now, when I say he has a looper, a Keeley looper on his pedal board, I don't mean something like the Ditto looper. This is more like a gig rig quartermaster kind of thing where it has a separate bypass loop where you can throw pedals in, have them already on, and then at the click of this 1 foot switch, the loop is actually turned on and all the pedals all of a sudden are in your chain, and then when this looper is off, that whole loop is bypassed. Now you can tell that that's what John is using because you can see the two inputs and outputs are being used, and also you can see that the lights, they have two of them on this thing here, that the red light is on, and that indicates that the looper is bypassed. It's not active, it has a bright blue light when it's actually on. Now, you can see here actually that I have the chorus drive loop labeled on this guy right here from when I did the 2019 World Tour replica pedal board, because during that tour, John actually had the Blackstone MOSFET Overdrive and the Boss CE2 in this labeled chorus drive loop, step of 1 foot switch here. Both those pedals were turned on and just helped him to not have to tap dance as much. And it's the exact same thing when it came to the lead tone of I Guess I Just Feel Like with the psychedelic loop that it was labeled Psych Loop actually, sorry. And that was using the companion psych amplifier machine. I've done a video on this on the channel as well for the lead tone for I Guess I Just Feel Like. I'll card that up above and link that in the description for you guys as well. But he was also using one of these things on the tour in 2019 as well. But for this pedal board, what is he using it for? Now, let's move on to the next pedal because I think that's what is happening, although I don't necessarily know why. So the next pedal on the pedal board is clearly a Univibe of some kind. Now, what Univibe it is kind of hard to tell, and there's only a few options that it could be just based off of the enclosure of the pedal itself. It's actually rather squared off, where a lot of Univibe pedals, if you actually look at them, they have a bit of a slope with the enclosure where to the front of the pedal, it actually is skinnier and the back is thicker. Even some of the newer like full tone Univibes, they look like that too. So I was discussing this with a few of my friends in our group chat and we kind of had a few theories. The Mojo Univibe, the Mojo Vibe from Sweet Sound is actually the very first one that came up. The enclosure size seems to be about right, but a couple issues with that is the color. I'm not sure if they ever made it in white or kind of like a silverish, which this one appears to be. And from this image and some of the other ones we've seen, I don't think it has these kind of chicken feet knobs on it. I think they're more of a traditional knob on it. So the Mojo Vibe, I don't think is the one, and it kind of turned into, well, maybe it's a full tone Deja Vibe. If you look at kind of the earlier ones from, I believe, the early 2000s, those ones, especially the custom shop version, actually was more of a squared enclosure, I guess rectangular enclosure, more like what we're looking at here, and they did come in that kind of raw, just like an unfinished version of the enclosure, which would line up with what we are seeing here, if that's actually what it is. Could just be the lighting that is making this look a bit more white. So that's what I think it is. I'm leaning towards it being a Deja Vibe, but it's impossible to tell from the images that we have. We just can't say with 100% certainty what this is. Okay, but why am I discussing this Univibe pedal and the Keeley Looper together? Now, initially, this is kind of what made the most sense. What would go in this Keeley Looper? Well, the Univibe kind of makes the most sense in terms of what would go in there, especially the way it's placed, because you can actually see the foot switch is higher up, and if you're John looking down at the pedal board, it's on the top left of the pedal because the pedal is placed sideways. So, in terms of him stepping on it, where it is physically on the pedal board and the way it's arranged, doesn't make a lot of sense for it to be that way for him to activate it the easiest. Now, without the Keeley Looper, it could easily fit normally sideways on the pedal board, I guess sideways being the correct way to place it. Now, there's also this shot you guys are going to be seeing on your screen now of the back of the pedal board, and we're going to trace the cables together here as well, because if I'm just going to zoom in on it a little bit more too. Zoom, there we go. Now, if you look at the back of the pedal board, you can see that what I'm seeing is that the Aquapus goes into the Provenance chrono delay, which makes sense if you trace the pedals. It looks like the one for the input of the Aquapus, that to me looks like it's coming from the bottom of the pedal board actually, and that's going to be from that last TS10. Then if you look at the output of the Provenance chrono delay, although it'd be easy to say that it looks like it's actually going behind the Keeley Looper and that cable into the Univibe, I believe if you just trace it properly, you can actually see it's a very short patch cable that goes right down into the Keeley True Bypass Looper. And then you actually see one of the cords that has to come around and going into the Univibe. That is what I believe is going on here, just based on the cabling evidence as well. I've shown you guys this image on your screen, and I just wanted to run through kind of the cabling, what it looks like to me there. And then obviously you see what looks like a cable coming from the True Bypass Looper into the Strymon Flint. That is what I believe is going on there. As to another reason why John is doing this, I don't know. I don't know if those older Univibe pedals or the specific one he's using has any tone suck, if it's not true bypass. I doubt there's a preamp or anything in it that he wouldn't want as part of his signal that's always on, but it's possible. But it's just what makes the most sense right now in terms of this video, and that's, to me at least, based just on tracing the cables here, that is what I am seeing is going on. At least let me know in the comments if you have any other theories, but nothing else makes sense. The delays are clearly going into each other. The drive pedals, obviously. What else would he have in that Keeley looper, right? It doesn't make sense. He's not going to have anything else. You see out of the Strymon Flint, the output of the Strymon Flint is actually just a big cable that'd be going into the amplifiers, or technically the splitter, but that's what's going on there too. So it's like, okay, the vibe is the only thing that makes sense. That's what I'm getting at here for you guys. All right, it's at this point in the video we're going to discuss the pedals and some examples of when John would use them. Now, let's actually discuss Vultures first, and then we'll kind of go into Who Did You Think I Was and Wait Till Tomorrow and the really interesting gain stacking that John would do. Now, for Vultures, I got a really cool clip for you guys where John's going between playing the main part of Vultures and a really kind of funky thing, and then he switches to playing some leads over it. And while this isn't necessarily an uncommon thing that you would see whenever John performs Vultures, what's really cool is you just see him stepping on the very far left TS10. Again, this is if you're John looking down at the pedal board. You see him stepping on it right when he goes into the lead line that he plays, a lead lick, turns it off immediately to perform, the rest of the Vultures part. Then when he goes back to playing the lead section, kind of switching back and forth, he adds the TS10 on and off, and he's stepping on it rather quickly just for when he needs it, then it's off again. And it's just really cool to see him doing this. Obviously in Vultures as well, you guys are hearing the Way Huge Octopus Mark II and the Providence Chrono delay. Both of those delays are on. The last thing I'll say for Vultures is that the Keeley Katana was probably on just throughout the entire song, just boosting John's clean signal for that song. Alright, we're going to move on to Who Did You Think I Was, and the main tone for this song has been one that I've been trying to figure out and kind of be happy with a theory for a while now, because at least during the original John Mayer Trio era, the commonly accepted belief is that it was the Keeley modded blues driver doing that bass sound. But for me, I've been kind of leading towards it being actually the Tube Screamer for the main sound. And once I kind of get all the details and I'm happy with the way I'm going to explain it to you guys, that's going to be a future video on the channel. It's one I'm really working on. But for this performance specifically, and this is going to kind of preview the theory in the video that's going to come, what I believe is going on is that the first TS10 is actually what is on for the entire song. That's what's giving John that kind of lighter overdrive sound, because his amps are not clean. I've listened to some different clips of the same performance, and it's not just his straight clean amp sound. I'm pretty confident in saying that. So what could be giving that bass sound? And again, even talking about the Apollo Theater show back in 2016, John only had 2 TS10s going. So what would he be using for his main bass sound of Who Did You Think I Was? And that, really cool rehearsal clip that he posted up playing that song. They never performed it that night, but it's the same pedal board that he used obviously for the rehearsal of that, for that performance. And that tone is very close to the Crossroads performance tone.
Let's see how it feels.
So for me, I'm thinking that it's a TS10 that's on for the bass tone, because then you can actually see when John goes to the solo, he stacks on the Klon Centaur into the very far left TS10 for the solo. So that's what I think is going on for the kind of entire Who Did You Think I Was tone, bass tone, and the solo. Then obviously for the outro solo, you hear that Univibe get kicked on as well. Okay, now to this point we're going to discuss what pedals John was using for Wait Till Tomorrow, and the first point here is actually kind of cool. So right before John launches into Wait Till Tomorrow, he plays a few, notes on the Monterey Strat, which is like, oh my god, he's finally brought that guitar back out for this performance. But he has quite a bit of delay on, and initially, the very first time I just watched the performance from start to finish, I thought, oh, the Providence chrono delay was just left on from Vultures, which it would have been on for that song as well. However, once new footage had come out, you actually can see that the blue LED indicating that the chrono delay is on throughout the entire performance of Wait Till Tomorrow. Now, in the mix that we hear from just the streamed version of the performance, you can't really hear it, but the blue LED is on. You guys are going to see it on your screen. I promise you it's on. So John was just having some subtle long delay going on throughout the entire song. And again, although we couldn't really hear it, that's what was going on. Now keep in mind with the Providence chrono delay, his long delay sound is not set that aggressively in terms of the echo hardness, which is what the actual setting is called on the Providence chrono delay. It's not set that high up in the mix, so you're not really going to be hearing that echo and those repeats as clearly as someone like the Edge's delays would be. So that's part of the reason as well you're not hearing in the mix, but for John, it is there. And I know a lot of people say when it comes to delays live, especially in bigger arenas where they kind of get lost, it can be a bit more of a feel thing rather than an actual delayed effect. But regardless, it was on throughout the entire performance. Hey guys, I'm just editing the video right now, and I forgot to mention that, as you can clearly see, the octopus was also on for Wait Till Tomorrow. Don't know why I didn't mention that in the video, but I didn't, so here it is now for you guys, and back to the video. Now, back during the original John Mayer Trio era, when it came to Wait Till Tomorrow's chorus, what John would do is use the TS-808 for that chorus section. But for this performance, you actually see that he's using the Klon Centaur to boost his guitar tone for that part. And what's even better is that we have really great footage of when it comes to the solo. So John already has the Klon Centaur on, then he steps on both TS-10's pre and post Klon Centaur for the outro solo, and it sounds fantastic. I've discussed this tone already on the channel, yesterday's video, at the time of when this video comes out, at least for you guys. And yeah, it was wicked. So the lead tone you guys are hearing there is TS-10 into Klon Centaur into another TS-10. Just absolutely wicked. And that essentially rounds off the pedals that John was using for the main three performances. When it kind of came to the last part of the night when everyone went back on stage, to be honest, I haven't really watched that yet at this time. I've just been too busy. But at that point, it does look like John had the Mark II Octopus on again for that one. Some of these shots of the pedalboard you guys are seeing, I believe, were taken at the very end of the night. So that's just an indication of what John had on for the kind of final part of the night, I guess. It's not really that important, but just thought I'd include that in there for you guys. And there you guys go. Hopefully not too long of a video discussing all the pedals around the pedalboard and how John used them. Hopefully that helps you guys as well. Again, the one thing we're just not 100% certain on, and we just can't be, is what Univibe John was using and exactly how, but I do believe that it was in that Keeley Looper pedal, and I do believe it is an original full tone custom shop Deja Vibe, one of those, again, earlier units that's more of an actual square even enclosure rather than the very common slanted angled one, however you want to say it. That's what I think is going on. So if you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below as always, because that also greatly helps out the algorithm and I really appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and if you've watched this video all the way up until this point, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It lets me know I'm doing a good job and helps my channel grow and reach more people as well. And until next time, you guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. And oh, by the way, next video on the channel is going to be discussing the amplifiers and more of the overall tone of the night. So you guys aren't going to want to miss that video as well if you enjoyed today's one also. So stay tuned for that one coming out probably the day after this one does. So till the next time, you guys, thank you so very much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.